Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reinventing Mental Health, where we are moving beyond symptom management to find root causes for mental health symptoms. Today, we have with us my friend, Patricia Lemer, and she is the author of this amazing book, Total Load Theory. And if you haven't read this yet, I highly recommend it. It is a great read and gives a lot of information about why these symptoms are showing up. So, Patricia, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I've been in the field of mental health since the late 60s. So if you do the math, that's almost 60 years. It's been a long time and a very interesting road. In undergraduate school, I studied psychology and math because I was always good at math and I loved quantifying things.
Mhm.
And what fun it was to quantify people's behavior. And so I learned how to do diagnostic testing. And I did that for almost 40 years.
Okay.
And the problem was that I was doing the wrong tests because
Mhm.
I was evaluating kids' abilities that they could show me and their academic achievement. But that didn't tell me, as you wanted to know, and I wanted to know, what were the root causes of the behaviors and the learning problems that I was seeing. And so I started talking to other people, and I became friends first with an occupational therapist, and then with a physical therapist, and a speech pathologist, and eventually a nutritionist who
Mhm.
said, Patty, you've got to ask them what they're eating for breakfast. And that was never on my list of questions. And
Yep.
so I learned about how all these different things interact: the biology, the motor, the sensory, the behaviors, the learning problems. And eventually, in the mid 90s, I
Mhm.
met up with a mother, and she was telling me that her son was just diagnosed with autism. I would learned about learning disabilities and attention problems, but this was the first I'd heard about autism.
Mhm.
And I was seeing these kids who were different, and I knew what she was talking about. But her theory was that her son was unique. There was nobody on earth like her son. And I said, I'm sorry, this was a Friday afternoon. I was tired. I'd seen too many people that week. And I said, your child's not unique. There's a lot of kids out there like him. And she said, well, I'm a lawyer and I've specialized in nonprofits. And if there's other people like you who think that, we need to start a nonprofit organization. I said, we do? And she said, let's do it. And I naively said, oh, I'm bossy and I like to run things. I'll be the executive director. And so for the next 20 years, I ran one of the first nonprofits called Developmental Delay Resources.
Okay.
And we purposefully didn't name it with a diagnosis in it, like
Mhm.
autism or the ADHD group or whatever it was. We wanted to look at these developmentally delayed kids who all presented differently and say, what are you eating for breakfast? And how can you catch a ball? And do you get headaches? And do you have diarrhea? And it was fascinating. And we were had the first website about the combination of these factors,
Mhm.
and we were writing people with snail mail and real stamps, and we were actually talking to them on the phone. There was no texting or any of that. And so
Mhm.
that went on until about 2012 or so,
Okay.
about 20 years. And I got tired of doing that, and I tried to kill the organization. And my board of directors said, no, you can't do that. We need you, and we need this group. And I said, well, somebody else has got to run it because I'm done. And I found the group called Epidemic Answers, founded
Mhm.
by Beth Lambert.
I know Beth. Yep.
And so we merged all the developmental delay resource material with Epidemic Answers. And I was the chairman of the board of Epidemic Answers, which has become Documenting Hope,
Yep.
for 3 years. And then I handed it off to Beth and her group, and now they're doing a great job spreading the word. And initially, it was a very similar organization with a directory of practitioners and
Mhm.
webinars and conferences and helping people one by one. And
Mhm.
now it's kind of morphed into Documenting Hope, which has some different kind of bigger plans. So
Mhm.
I wrote my first book in 2008, which was called Envisioning a Bright Future. And
Okay.
I was asked by the Optometric Extension Program to write a book for optometrists about all
Mhm.
the other aspects of developmental problems and vision problems in people who had vision problems.
Yep.
And it was quite a successful book, and it was edited. I edited it, and
Mhm.
it was actually written by 2 dozen different experts in the field.
Okay.
And then I got brave and I said, well, I can write a book by myself. And I wrote Outsmarting Autism.
Okay.
And it was in 2014. And that book was then revised 5 years later. And then 5 years after that, last year, or 2024 actually, it went out of print. And when Outsmarting Autism went out of print because the publisher was going in a different direction, I bought the manuscript.
Mhm.
And again, I thought I was done. I had a wonderful career. I'd watched lots of kids get better. And Mary Holland at Children's Health Defense said, Patty, you need to have an active published book, and we'll help you get a new publisher. And I said, are you sure? Do I want to do one more book? And she said, I think Skyhorse Publishing would be interested.
Okay.
And by that time, I was thinking way outside the box of autism.
Mhm.
And those previous books, the two versions of Outsmarting Autism, were really focused on kids who were profoundly autistic and moderately autistic, not so much the people who get diagnosed in their 30s and 40s and have PhDs and work as absent minded professors. But I realized that all the different areas that I was writing about,
Mhm.
the nutrition, the sensory, the motor, the language, the social emotional issues, were
Yep.
present in people who had mental health diagnoses also.
Yeah.
And many of our kids with autism had dual diagnoses. They had autism and OCD. They had autism and ADHD. They
Yep.
had anxiety. They had panic disorders. They had PANS, they had Lyme, they had everything.
Yep.
And so I decided to focus this new book on a bigger world, not just the autism world.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I discovered that there was a group of psychiatrists out there
Mhm.
who were unhappy with the poor outcomes that their patients had had with just drug therapy and
Okay.
counseling. And that they started asking, what did you have for breakfast? And
Mhm.
they realized that there were serious nutritional deficiencies,
Mhm.
serious picky eating, and serious nutritional issues in many of their patients. And they jumped on the ketogenic bandwagon,
Mhm.
and they started putting their patients on the ketogenic diet, which, as you know, is a high fat, low carbohydrate diet.
Yep.
And guess what? Their
Started
patients
reversing.
better.
Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it, Mary? I mean,
Yep.
really. And it's such a duh for me. I had been talking diet since Keith Connors said
Hmm.
that kids were hyperactive because of additives in their food. And
Hmm.
so this goes way back to Doris Rapp and the pioneers that many of people today don't even know about.
Right.
Doris Rapp was on the Phil Donahue show in the 70s, where she turned beautiful, angelic children sitting there with their hands folded into monsters by giving them a little wheat or some sugar
Yep.
or some soy products. And
Yep.
so I knew that this was a big deal. And so I embraced the whole mental health world. And I'm grateful to you for offering to put me out there into the mental health world, because I'm known in the autism world the
Hmm.
most, somewhat in the ADHD world, but not so much in the mental health world, even though I'm a mental health professional. And I was so fortunate that James Maskell, who's a functional medicine guru, but not a
Hmm.
doctor, was willing to write the foreword to my book, because
Hmm.
he's connected with the functional medicine doctors, who are primarily the ones who the patients who want to get to root causes are seeing.
Yeah. So, my huge goal inside of the mental health space is we've got to change the paradigm. This throwing meds at somebody without asking them, like you're saying, what are you eating for breakfast? What does your sleep look like? Why are you black and blue underneath both of your eyes all the time?
Right.
What's the reason for that? We're looking at nutrient deficiencies, liver issues, we're not detoxing, all of these things. When I met you and I got to read your book, I was looking at, you're talking about all the same things we're talking about. We've got to change how we are diagnosing and addressing mental health conditions, because mental
Right.
health is not an illness, it is a symptom.
I love it. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yep.
And the body and the brain and your emotions and your physical health are intertwined.
Yeah, and they keep trying to act like mental health is separate from the rest of the body, but it's not. And this is all connected. The gut's
All
feeding
connected.
the brain's impacting how every part of our body is working, our endocrine system, our hormones, all of it. So we've got to fix the root cause.
So many of the root causes, of course, are what you talk about, that what you're eating, drinking, breathing, the nutrition, the food, the toxins, and of course, sleep is so big. And you and I could go on and on about what's wrong with someone's sleep, and how do you sleep, how much do you sleep, what does your
Mhm.
bedroom look like, and how important sleep is. I always put food first. I always thought food was the number one focus. And I am now sort of moving into, I think sleep is even more important than food, because
Absolutely.
you can live a long time without food, and even if you're eating the wrong food. But in 3 days of sleep deprivation, you're cuckoo.
Oh,
You
yeah.
are psychotic.
Yep.
And so we have to prioritize sleep. And a lack of sleep is one of the huge stressors that I talk about and you talk about in your book too. And how to get a good night's sleep. How much sleep? You got to sleep 8 hours. And an interrupted sleep isn't the same, as any new mother will tell you. Catching 2 hours and then 2 more hours and then 2 hours. It doesn't work that way. You've got to get into a deep sleep and
Yep.
stay there. And then there's movement and keeping your body moving. The lymph system doesn't have a pump on it. It's not
Hmm.
like our heart. And the only way you can get that lymph moving and not stagnant is by moving that body.
Yep.
And people say, oh, I hate to exercise. Well, this is exercise. Even if you're not able to stand or
Mhm.
walk, you are able to do exercises. And everybody today is so creative
Mhm.
about how to get sedentary people moving, especially the elderly. There are so many wonderful programs now and using music and
Absolutely.
rhythm. It's just there, you've got to find a way to keep your body moving.
So, have you seen this recent study about the fact that even just visualizing yourself participating in exercise or conducting exercise, your body and your muscles are responding as though you're actually doing it?
Isn't that amazing?
The brain is
Oh,
just amazing. But I have worked with clients who are, they're 400 or 500 pounds, they cannot get out of bed. But we have started with just visualization of exercise while modifying the diet. And we are seeing improvement in muscle, we're seeing energy improvement, and we're seeing weight loss.
and again, you're hitting on one of my favorite subjects, visual. And the
Mhm.
visualization is a tool that is used by lower and higher level functioning people. The
Mhm.
athletes will tell you that
Oh, yeah.
they visualize where that ball, where that puck is going before
Mhm.
they even hit it. And that is how they are so good at their sports. And
They will even do, so I have seen peak performance training with Olympic athletes where they are doing neurofeedback while watching themselves perform their sport. And
I
it's like all
love
their best moves. So while they're watching themselves do the sport the correct way, their brain is also being trained to respond to that. And it just helps excel their progress and how good they are inside of their sport.
So my good friend Lynn Hellerstein, who's an optometrist in
Mhm.
Colorado, I did a podcast like this with her, and it
Uh-huh.
just posted today. And so it's called Vision More Than Sight.
Okay.
And she interviewed me like you are today on the role of vision in many of the mental health and other disorders.
Mhm.
And it's an area that I have just become so passionate about. And I have, in the 90s, 80s, and 90s and beyond, I was kind of a bridge
Mhm.
between the optometrists and the public. And I taught the public the power of vision therapy. And
Mhm.
many people are unaware of behavioral optometry, and they go to the ophthalmologist who is trained in disease. This
Yep.
is not a disease.
Nope.
This is a skill that we learn through movement, the
Mm.
same way we learn how to talk and how to socialize. And so, if your child is having learning or behavioral issues, please get a developmental vision exam by
Oh,
going to covd.org, and you can, or covd.com, I can't remember which it is, and you can find an optometrist in your area all over the world. And if you can't find one, you can email me at developdelay@gmail.com, and I will help you find one.
so we are located in Round Rock, Texas, and we actually have an amazing relationship with Aspire Vision Therapy. I love their two owners. We have a wonderful relationship with both of them. My kids actually went through vision therapy while we were dealing with the fallout from the vaccine injury that my son had. One of the therapies that we ended up doing was vision therapy. So they would participate in the visual exercises, and then we'd also do neurofeedback that same day. So we would be strengthening, we'd go
Wow.
after O1, O2 at the back of the head. And then with the vision therapy, it really helps them excel through that process.
Oh,
So,
that's super.
yeah.
Yeah. People just are unfamiliar with this area
Mhm.
and their role of vision in reading comprehension and
Yeah.
in writing a story about what you did on your summer vacation.
Yep.
It's not just about sports, but it's just so important that
Mhm.
it has to be looked at carefully. You mentioned that your son had a vaccine injury.
Mhm.
The eyes are the nutritionally most demanding organ in our body. And
Mhm.
so I recommend to parents that they take a close up photo of their child's eyes prior to vaccination, if they are doing vaccination, so
Mhm.
you can see if they're straight. Because many times the vaccine injury is that it disrupts the binocularity of the eyes.
Yep.
And so one eye would turn in or out or up or down. And so you don't get binocular vision, and thus
Mhm.
you don't get depth perception.
Yep.
And some cases resolve themselves as the body resolves the vaccine. And like your son, perhaps it wasn't resolved. So you
Mhm.
required intervention to get those eyes back straight and working together.
Yeah, because we originally went for a dyslexia assessment, and it wasn't dyslexia, but it was
No,
tracking and convergence. His eyes could not work together to read a paragraph. So he'd start at the top line of the paragraph, but before he got to the end of the sentence, he was reading 3 or 4 lines down. So nothing ever made sense. And once we realized that that's exactly what was causing it, those exercises, we didn't go for very long. And his eyes were able to get themselves back on track. And he's an avid
fantastic.
reader.
So there's some other areas that I go into in the book
Yep.
that are unique to this book and the field of mental health.
Mhm.
And one of them is trauma.
Right.
And trauma doesn't have to be that you saw somebody murdered or that you were in a fire. Trauma is anything that the brain interprets as traumatic, as
Right.
problematic,
Mhm.
as hurtful. And it could be that first grade teacher who yelled at you and said, "You're
Mhm.
stupid.
Yep.
Can't you read that?" And thankfully, that doesn't happen so much anymore. But it could be something that somebody said or did or happened to you.
Mhm.
For me, it was a move. I My mother moved us without any notice from Pittsburgh, where I was born and where
Mhm.
I'm fourth generation, to Atlanta, Georgia, with 3 days' notice in the middle of the civil rights movement. And you could have taken me to the moon. It was that different. I
Mhm.
moved from a loving neighborhood to no neighborhood, and black toilets and white toilets, and
Right.
Martin Luther King marching, and then
Mhm.
being assassinated, and the two Kennedy assassinations. Those were all in the 3 years of trauma that I experienced.
Mhm.
I can't even go into the Atlanta airport without a visceral reaction
Mhm.
anymore.
Mhm.
I've gotten so I can change planes there. But it was so traumatic to me. I had to work very hard to get over it. And
Yep.
so it's not, as I said, a fire or a murder or a physical abuse. It's
Mhm.
something that your brain interprets as abuse or
Right.
trauma, and then it gets into the cell. It's
Mhm.
not just in your mind, just like mental health isn't a behavior problem. It
Mhm.
could be a nutritional problem. And so the work now that's being done on trauma, especially with the vagus nerve, as
Mhm.
Dr. Steve Porges, who's a psychologist, is directing, and he should get some major prize for
Mhm.
discovering that the vagus nerve is really what guards and guides our emotional status. And if
Mhm.
we are in an all vigilant fight or flight mode instead of a rest and digest calm mode,
Mm-hmm.
then our body isn't going to be able to take advantage to its maximum of the therapies that we're
Mm-hmm.
giving.
Yep.
And it's not going to listen to us and say, sit still and pay attention, because it's like, are you kidding me? I,
Yep.
uh, I need to watch. I need to be vigilant. Whatever traumatized me may come back. And so my book has a chapter on regulating the nervous system. And
Mm-hmm.
some of this is done through reflex integration, some of it's done through the nervous system, through the vagus nerve. And I learned from Dr. Neil Nathan,
Mm-hmm.
who's written a marvelous book called The Sensitive Patient's Healing Guide, how important getting the nervous system regulated is in
Mm-hmm.
any kind of healing. And
Mm-hmm.
they all had experienced trauma that had not been resolved.
Mm-hmm. Or they've been told that the thing that they had perceived as trauma wasn't trauma, which is
Right,
often why people don't actually heal from it.
right, right,
So we actually, for our clients that have like anxiety disorders and PTSD, if they are going through neurofeedback, we actually use a vagus nerve stimulator before we do their session. And we're seeing a lot of progress with that as well. I know I use it for myself. If I start feeling like my anxiety is going up through the course of the day, I will pull it out. I will put it right on, sit with it for 6 minutes. I feel great.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. These devices are now becoming more and more readily available, and these conversations are becoming more mainstream.
Yeah,
I scroll through social media and, an ad comes up for vagus nerve stimulators of all kinds of different types. Yep. And then also the fascia and how that is holding all of our tension and how it holds our lymphatic system hostage and doesn't
right.
allow our system to drain. And, to hear the conversation of, well, just jump on a trampoline for 5 minutes. And that helps that system kind of loosen up and be able to start flowing again.
Yep.
Whoever used to talk about that stuff? No one.
Nobody talks about it. Occupational therapists do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually my introduction to how to relieve some of this stress from trauma, was
Mm-hmm.
jumping on a trampoline or a rebounder. And it's amazing. It really is.
Something so simple and something that is actually affordable. You can buy a rebounder for between $50 and $70 on Amazon and just set it right
Yeah.
up in your house.
And free interventions are gargling and humming
Yep.
and even singing. So you can
Yep.
do those when you're brushing your teeth, when you're making a meal, anytime. Humming is really activates that
Yep.
vagus nerve.
Absolutely. I do that. That one I will do if I'm driving and I'm getting angry at the other
Uh-huh.
drivers. I'll start humming.
That's good.
So, over the course of your career, you've had a very long career. You're talking over 60 years. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've been inside of this space. I've seen a lot of changes in the things that are happening with, especially our children. I know today in my office, I see more kids with anxiety and ADHD diagnoses as young as 3 years old. Have you also seen a shift like that over the course of your career where it seems like these symptoms are coming on earlier and earlier?
We live in a more toxic world than we ever
Mhm.
have before.
Yep.
And we're living in a fear-based world. We're cautioning kids all the time, be careful, don't do that, you'll fall. Even
Mhm.
in our regular language, we're saying to somebody who left our house, we had a wonderful visit, and you're saying, be safe. Really, that the message there is, it's dangerous out there, and
Yeah.
you have to do something so that you don't get hurt or
Mhm.
caught into something. And I have a poem, a great poem of all the dangerous things that we did in the 50s, when I grew up, we drank out of the hose.
Yep.
Imagine a mother letting a kid drink out of a hose today. There were no seatbelts in our cars.
There were no
We
helmet. Yeah, even I grew
There
up.
were
So
no
I,
helmet.
I was born in '78. So I grew up in the '80s. So same thing. Like I sat in the back of the truck when we
Yeah,
drove places.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And we went out. There were no cell phones. We
Mhm.
went out to play after school until the street lights came on.
Yep.
And there was no cell phone attaching us to our home after dinner. We could stay until the street lights went on, and we knew that it was dark and it was time to come home and go to bed.
Mhm.
And we ate dinners together. There were just so many ways that society has contributed to this attention issues,
Mhm.
fear, and anxiety issues. We are pushing little kids so much too fast. We
Mhm.
forgot about play, the importance of hands on, sensory based, three-dimensional play,
Yep.
playing a video game, playing on a phone, playing on a computer is not the same stimulation for your brain as actually building a tower and watching it fall down.
Or
And
climbing a
all the
tree. Yes. No, we have definitely pulled kids out of their actual best way to learn, grow, and develop. And I know you were talking about in your book, like they tell us we have to lay our babies on their backs. But our babies actually need to have experience laying on their bellies. That's how they build their core muscles. That's how they build these muscles, their neck muscles. And we have so many kids that don't have bilateral synchronization because they never were given that opportunity.
and that's how the eyes connect with the hands.
Yep.
When you're on your tummy and your eyes see your hands, is when you get bilateral integration. When a
Mhm.
baby's on its back, it's neurologically upside down. And these hands are floating around in the air. The eyes don't even know that they're attached to your body. And
Mhm.
so we have to go back to some of these old fashioned ideas and realize how bad screen time is for a child,
Mhm.
how bad it is for them to be sedentary, and how some of these practices are ill conceived. They are
Mhm.
not good for motor development, for vision development, for cognitive development, and it's so important. And there's a book called Smart Moves, classic. It was probably came out when you were born, by Carla Hannaford, and
Mhm.
she talks about why learning is not all in your head. Learning is in the body has to move to know where it is in space.
Yep.
And if you know where you are in space, then you can judge where someone else is in space.
Mhm.
And unless you move through space, you can't do that. Your
Yeah.
brain doesn't get it. It has to be stimulated by moving.
Well, and I like the book Anxious Generation, where he's talking about how much of an impact the phones and the tablets and the computers are having on kids and why kids are so anxious today. And again, he also said it goes back to those messages we're always trying to say, don't do that, you're going to get hurt.
Right.
We pulled our kids out of public school because they were constantly getting in trouble. They were talking too much. They were touching other people. And I was like, but that's part of why they're supposed to be there. We're told they're supposed to socialize while they're at school, right?
That's the way they get information.
But my kids are both boys. So boys are supposed to be physical. They're supposed to climb things. They're supposed to take things apart. They're supposed to ask 9 million questions. And when you're
Right.
telling them to sit down and shut up, well, you are actually telling them that the way that they learn and the way they interpret the world is wrong. So inside of the homeschool community, I am so happy, and they have changed. They changed so much when we pulled them out. They were happier, they're more well balanced, and they're learning
Wow.
the way that they want to learn. And they're so much more physical, and it's real socialization. You know, when we go to an event, there's a whole group of homeschool kids, and we're talking from kindergarten to seniors, and that's real life. Inside of the classroom today, kids are stuck with kids that are only their age. That's not real life. When we go outside of the school environment, that is not the environment that we're in.
Right.
We have to be able to navigate people who are younger than us and people who are older than us. But also, the homeschool community is much more physically active. We're doing play
Interesting.
dates and park meetups that are in public parks and in national parks. We're hiking mountains and they're building fires and they're jumping in the creek to catch fish and frogs and all of the fun things. And that's actually how kids are supposed to grow and develop.
I live in a townhouse development, and I can we have two new families with 3-year-olds, and I can see them playing outside. Yesterday it was in single digits,
Mhm.
and these kids were sliding on the ice on pans, and their parents built an enormous igloo that they
Good.
got inside with a dog, and nobody was saying, "Ew, it's too cold to go outside." Nobody was complaining. They were out there for a couple of hours. They were bundled up and they were having the best time. And it just made me feel so good to watch them play like that.
Oh, I love that. That builds resilience. It builds, again, that knowledge of where is my body in space and
Yeah,
what can I
yeah,
do if I slip? What do I do if I fall? That's awesome. I love hearing
yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so also in your book, you were talking about, so you had different stressors and you had different categories. You said environmental, biological, physical and lifestyle, emotional, and educational. So I was just talking about homeschooling and why that's so much different than what's being done in public schools. So, what are some of the things that you really think that parents need to pay a little bit more attention to about what's happening inside of schooling right now?
I want them to make sure that their kids are not being pushed too fast
Hmm.
before their bodies are ready. Kids need to play. We
Yep.
just talked about that. And academics are being introduced in kindergarten now. And letters and numbers are abstract representations
Mhm.
of things. They are not things, they
Yep.
don't exist. And a 3-year-old who can recite the alphabet, la di da, I don't care. It's meaningless. That makes him
Mhm.
a good parent. And a kid who has word recognition and letter recognition, that's not the job of a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old.
No.
The job of those kids is to touch and move and play, and as
Mhm.
we said, to figure it out where they are. And I think parents have to be stalwart in getting their schools to understand of a late cutoff for kindergarten. I want those kids fully 6 before they
Mhm.
go to kindergarten. I want them to have established what you called laterality, a handedness.
Mhm.
I don't want them to be introduced and sitting, reading, and writing at that young age. You want them to be playing and experimenting and
Yep.
touching and moving. The other thing is that the teachers have to model appropriate behavior, just like a parent does.
Mhm.
And so if a teacher is drinking a Coke or something that is blue or green or eating chips, that is a message to the kids that my beloved teacher, the one I admire and respect, does that. So
Mhm.
I can do that.
Yep.
In the same way that you have to model that at home. And that early cutoff just doesn't work. They now, when my daughter went to high school, she had an October 5th birthday
Mhm.
where cutoff was September. And they, because she was smart, they wanted her to be the youngest child in the class. And I said, no, she can't be. I want her to be fully sick. Oh, she's so smart, Patty. She'll be so bored. I said, it's your job for her not to be bored. They wouldn't let me do it. They wouldn't let me hold her back. So she was the youngest in the class the whole time. all 12 years. And guess what she did after high school? She took a year off and she caught herself up because she knew she wasn't emotionally ready to go to college and to leave home. And so it's very important that schools and school boards recognize true developmental milestones. Another area they can look at is the introduction of toxins. There's toxins everywhere.
Mhm.
Open the windows if you can. Let the kids be outside. Think about toxic materials when you renovate. I once went into a school where the smell of the new carpeting overwhelmed me. And I tried to be positive and I said to the principal, "Oh, this is lovely new carpeting you have." And she said, "Oh, that's not new. It's been down a year." And I'm thinking, and it still
Oh my
stinks,
God, it's still off gassing.
still off gassing. The schools have to take into consideration that they may not be.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing that I would want to add to that would be careful before you label a child and say he's learning disabled. He's needs a tutor or an aide in his class,
Mm-hmm.
or he needs a special class in a special school. We all have different milestones.
Yep.
And give a child accommodations if he needs them, but first of all, look at the curriculum and the demands and see if they're reasonable. I wouldn't be so quick to label a child and give him an IEP. And many parents don't agree with me on this because they see their child suffering. But many times it's not the child's fault, it's the
Mm-hmm.
fault of the curriculum.
And that was an issue that my kids were also having is my kids are both very, very intelligent. So even in the 6th grade, they're trying to give them work and both of my kids are done with their work in 5 minutes. So then they're bored. So either direction, if they're gifted and they're not meeting the child's needs, they're going to have issues at school. And then
Right.
if they're struggling in a particular subject, maybe that just isn't the subject that we need to be focusing so much attention on. Let's praise them and give them all of the support that they need, but give them the most praise and the most attention for the subject they're excelling in instead of the subject that they're having a hard time in.
So we've been talking a lot about kids and school, and
Mm-hmm.
my book goes into the whole lifespan.
Yep.
So it's important that when we're talking about mental health, we include those young adults and even older adults who may not encounter anxiety and depression and until adulthood when the
Mm-hmm.
workplace becomes demanding or in a relationship with a potential partner where the demands exceed a person's ability to
Mm-hmm.
comply. And so I have, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 chapters
Mm-hmm.
on adults and the workplace. And what we're seeing is in the name of neurodiversity,
Mm-hmm.
we're allowing a lot of accommodations for people who have sensory issues, who
Mm-hmm.
have visual issues that didn't weren't apparent until they had very stringent demands.
Mm-hmm.
And I urge those older patients, clients, those adults to consider some of these interventions. What are
Absolutely.
they eating? Are they cooking? Are they ordering in every meal? Are they
Mm-hmm.
taking transportation a couple of blocks when they could be walking to work
Yep.
so that they could move a little? Are they taking breaks? Are they getting enough sleep? These are important self-care areas that we have to help some of our newly diagnosed and newly anxious and depressed adults find ways to cope and find people like you who can help them know what to do to get a better night's sleep. There's so much in my book on sleep hygiene. Have you considered taking melatonin? Is your Wi-Fi turned off at night? We don't want Wi-Fi zapping our nervous system all night long. What does your bedding look like? When was the last time you bought a new mattress? We
Yeah.
have to look at all of those things and not just at young children, but look at some of the adults and help them so that they can
Mhm.
continue to function maximally.
Absolutely. And so some of the adults that I've had in my practice that are really, really struggling with sleep, I will actually send them camping for a week.
Send them what?
Camping.
Camping.
Yeah.
Did they
So
go or did they?
they have actually gone because they knew that sleep was the biggest issue. We had done everything that we could work on possible inside of their homes and inside of their bedrooms, but we still were not able to get what we were seeking. So by sending them out into nature for a week, we're
Wow.
able to get back to the earth and the natural rhythm, and it helps reset their cortisol because many of them, it's the cortisol is spiking and dropping at the wrong times. So if we go back out into nature and we live there for a week and we allow our body just to resync, they come back and sleep is great.
Isn't that terrific? So your therapy this week is go camping.
Yep.
That's wonderful. Wonderful idea.
Yep. Sometimes unique approaches, but they get some of the best results.
So another piece in my book that's unique and pioneering is that it has an AI component. And so if anybody has used ChatGPT, it's a little bit like that. But if you ask ChatGPT a question, it searches the whole universe of the internet and
Mhm.
it'll say, well, some people think this and others think that. But my AI companion searches just my intellectual material.
Okay.
So I've had a wonderful person actually in Australia, the father of a young son with autism,
Mhm.
who attributes outsmarting autism to healing his child. So he gave me this AI companion as a gift.
Oh, nice.
Yep. And so you can ask it either by typing in a question or by asking a question verbally. And the companion will answer you
Mhm.
just as Patricia Lemer says, blah, 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 blah. And it's quite remarkable. It searches not only my book, but over 100 of my podcasts.
Oh,
And I
nice.
have a bi monthly podcast called The Autism Detectives, which is on Spotify and Apple and all those other platforms that you can listen to podcasts on. And the people I've interviewed are everything from practitioners to biologists and nutritionists and
Mhm.
therapists to lots of doctors and researchers who are experts in certain aspects of these diseases and not really diseases, but conditions. What amazing aspect of this AI companion is that if you do it verbally, I answer you in my voice.
Oh, how cool.
So I recorded 5 hours of my voice. And
Okay.
so this, I don't know, this magic puts it all together
Mhm.
and it sounds like me. And it can do it in right now 8 languages.
Oh, wow. Very
So
cool.
if you're in Canada and speak French, or if you're in Germany and speak German, if you ask the question in your language, I answer it in my voice in your language.
I love it.
I speak Chinese. I speak French. I speak Italian. And this program develops, I'll be able to speak over 70 languages.
That's amazing.
It's
Yeah.
really science fiction.
Yep. AI, it's pretty amazing some of the things that it can do and be useful for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Definitely want to have another conversation and bring you back on and continue talking about all of these wonderful things.
Thank you. You also hooked me up with a wonderful team that I think is going to help me get the word out
Mhm.
and connect me with the blogosphere, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
I love them. They do great things for me.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, I will make sure that I grab all of Patty's social media links and her book links and share them when we put the video live. For all of our viewers, please remember to like, share, subscribe, follow, and comment because that helps us move up inside of all of those algorithms. Thank you again, Patricia. I'm so glad that you got to join us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. And people can get the book on anywhere you buy books. Right now, it's doing extremely well, and it's discounted on Amazon for the first time ever. It
Okay.
was selling at list price, and they finally decided to discount it. And I hope that all of you who buy it will feel comfortable writing a 5-star review. And I love your list of all the things that you need to do. You can follow me on Facebook, and Outsmarting Autism also has a Facebook page. But
Okay.
the best way to follow me is Patricia, and my middle name is Spear, Spear Lemer, on Facebook and on Amazon. So thank you so much, Mary. This has been so much fun.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that we ran into each other at that event.